Here we go. Good morning. The April 14th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Estimates is now called to order. In the interest of promoting health and safety as we continue to deal with COVID-19 pandemic, the Board of Estimates continues to meet virtually. At this time, I will ask our amazing Comptroller, Comptroller Bill Henry, for any corrections, additions, and noted abstentions for today's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are no changes or corrections to today's agenda. On pages 43 and 44, there is a protest for item 2, Bureau of Procurement B50006180, bituminous paving materials, hot and cold patch. Protest was supplemental protest was received from Robert Fulton DeShiel on behalf of M. Louise Products, LLC. The following items are being deferred on page 39, item 10, Bureau of Procurement contract number B50003586, automatic vehicle location. This contract is being deferred from today until next Wednesday, April 21st. The following items are being moved to the non-routine agenda. On page 29, Department of Public Works, Office of Engineering and Construction, task assignment number 007 with Transviron Incorporated. On page 38, item number 8, Bureau of Procurement contract number 08000, license plate readers, software and maintenance plans. On page 40, item 11, Bureau of Procurement contract number B50004352, Armed Security Guard Services. And item 43, I'm sorry, on page 43 and 44, the protest already read is being moved to non-routine. There are no items being moved to the routine agenda. And we have the following abstentions. On page 4, Honorable Mayor Brandon Scott is abstaining on Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement agreement with the Johns Hopkins University. And Acting Director of DPW, Mr. Matthew Garbark, is abstaining on page 52, items number 2 and 3, Personnel Matters, Environmental Control Board. There are no other abstentions.
Thank you, Mr. Controller. Now I'd like to direct the board's attentions to the memorandum from my office dated April the 12th, 2021, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items together with any corrections and additions that have been noted by our comptroller. I will entertain a motion to approve all the items contained in the routine agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor of approving the items on the routine agenda, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The routine items have been adopted. Now on to the non-routine agenda. The first stop is DPW task assignment. For the first item on the non-routine agenda today, which can be found on page 29, the Department of Public Works, Office of Engineering and Construction task assignment. This item was deferred from, last week's agenda. I know that both the Comptroller Henry and myself had questions about the MBE WBE participation goals on this project, as well as the task assigned. So first, we will hear back from the department with that, and we'll return to Mr. Yosef Kabeta, DPW, to speak on behalf of this item. Mr. Kabeta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President Mosby. Good morning. Good morning, Mayor Scott, Comptroller Henry, and members of the board. I'm Yosef Kabeta, Acting Bureau Head for the Bureau of Water and Wastewater, Department of Public Works. The DPW is requesting the board to approve task number 7 under Project 1806 to Transviron. Task 7 is in the amount of $249,172.19. There have been 6 tasks prior to this. Our current achievement in terms of MBE is actually different from what is noted in the agenda. We have updated it to reflect the fact that Transviron is an MBE firm, and so their participation in self-performance accounts for or counts towards the MBE attainment. So that percentage is actually 42.14% as opposed to 24.83%. WBE attainment as of this task is still 0. However, there are 2 tasks following, tasks number 8 and number 9, which cumulatively will achieve 10% WBE attainment. And those should be coming to the board in the next few weeks. So in general, as we've said before, we the obligation for attaining and making sure that there's participation of MBEs and WBEs on contracts is the responsibility of the prime, and we definitely put their feet to the fire to make sure that they do achieve those percentages. However, in this particular case, in the first initial tasks, we have not achieved the WBE that we would like, but we will soon once task 8 and task 9 come to the board. So with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I only have a couple questions. Mr. Cabetta has really laid out a lot of the information that we were trying to make sure we had. I guess if there's any way that DPW can explain why there was no WBE attainment in the first 3 years of this contract. If this contract is supposed to expire 4 years from when it was awarded in June of 2018, we're getting kind of far along to just be starting the WBE participation, or was that planned all along?
I cannot say that the attainment, the WBE attainment was planned. I think in general, as some of these tasks are assigned, there might have been an oversight on the part of the project team as well as the contractor. But we are 50% spent. The upset limit for this contract is $5 million, so we do have quite a good ways to go. So achieving that the WBE participation should not be a problem.
Okay, when you said that you've got 2 tasks coming up that are going to provide the WBE attainment, when do you anticipate bringing those tasks to the board for approval?
I would say within the next 3 months.
Okay. All right. Well, then, Mr. President, the only other thing I would add here is I would echo your previous comments about wishing that we could get a more even distribution of MBE and WBE participation along the length of the contract. It's one thing to say that we have trust in the contract management and we have trust in the contractors, but it looks concerning when routinely MBE or WBE attainment is all made up at the very end of the contract, and unless people can show at the front end that this is something that is planned and expected, it looks like we waited until the end and, oh wait, now we've got to do the MBE or the WBE, and if that's not really the motivating factor, then we should be doing more to avoid the appearance of it. And that's all I'll say. Thank you, Mr. President.
No, thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Another issue regarding this inverse bell curve is, you just keep cornering certain type of work for MBE, WBEs, be it setup or cleanup or whatever. Mr. Cabetta, real quick, on task 8 and 9, could you kind of communicate to the board what the required work is on those 2 tasks?
The required work is for the most part construction management assistance, construction inspection. There are two separate water main replacement projects. One in the Barclay neighborhood. The other is generally throughout the city. So WC 1290 and WC 1316.
Gotcha. And what I've heard is, I know that we talk specifically because WBE is so far behind its goal, but what I'm hearing is at the completion of task 8 and 9, we will be whole as it relates to the goal associated with MBE as well as WBE at 29% and 10% respectively, right?
That is correct.
All right. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns? Mr. Mayor, I see your hand raised.
No, thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Comptroller. And I just wanted to note for the record that as a part of the procurement forum, I've talked with our city administrator and talked to about this kind of issue in particular, about how contracts can be reworked and broken up in different ways to make sure that we are properly reflecting how we're going to work with our small businesses, our MBEs, our WBEs on this type of work. And I look forward to seeing that implemented as we go through the reform process.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this point, are there any questions or concerns from other members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, I'll entertain a motion regarding this item.
I move approval.
Second.
This item has been moved and properly second for approval. All those in favor of approving this item, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is now approved. Next up, we go into BPD. And the next item on the non-routine agenda can be found on page 38, item number 8. This is a sole source contract of $420,000. $420,401.50 with Selects ES Incorporated for license plate reader software and maintenance plans for the Baltimore Police Department. To speak on this item on behalf of BPD, we have Mr. Edward Davis. Chief Davis, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to discuss this contract. Selects is the manufacturer of the LSAG license plate reader technology. LSAG was awarded the State of Maryland license plate reader contract to provide and manage a statewide license plate reader service. For BPD to participate in the statewide program, we are required to use the LPR contract awarded to LSAG. And as a result of that state requirement, the use of this contract must establish a sole source contract to acquire these services.
Thank you, Chief. So in essence, in order for us to integrate with the state program and vehicle tag reading from a regional and statewide perspective is critical to the work of Baltimore Police Department. In order for us to integrate into the state system, this is the only vendor that we could utilize to do so based off of the state's decision, correct?
That is correct. The only vendor authorized and for us to participate in the state program. It doesn't mean that we're required to use a state program.
Understood.
Right. There you go.
Understood. And it's important. And if you could just kind of enumerate the importance of us being able to participate in the state program, just from a policing perspective.
To participate in the state program means that we will then have access to all reported activities related to license plate and reader program. If we were to have our own program, for example, it would only reflect the city of Baltimore license plate reader requirements. But by participating in the state of Maryland, we then get access to all license plate readers. So if someone came from Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County into the city, our system that's integrated with the state would allow us to be able to read those license plates.
Now, Chief Davis, last question. Do you know how long that agreement is on the state level? Do you have that off the top?
I was told that this agreement was a 10-year agreement. Wow. I don't know where it is in the 10-year process, but it is a pretty lengthy engagement by the state with LSAG.
Well, Chief Davis, thank you for providing that background. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Mr. Comptroller, I see your hand raised. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief Davis, just to be clear, there are other companies and other similar technologies that we could be considering. It's just that we're effectively prohibited from even putting it out to bid to them because we would be hamstrung by the inability to connect to the statewide database.
That is
true?
correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. Then in that case, let me just go over two quick questions about the contract as it is, and skip over the fact that the state is making us use this particular vendor. Is this a completely new contract for equipment and services, or is this something that allows us to keep using a system the city already has?
It allows us to keep using the system the city already has.
Okay. How are these license plate readers going to be deployed? Are these going to be mobile on police vehicles, or are they going to be at fixed locations?
So we have both in the city. We have both fixed and mobile sites. It is the distribution of the fixed sites is done in a fashion by which to really cover the city as a whole. It doesn't focus on specific areas, but it really is designed to provide a service wide enough to ensure that we can leverage the technology in an effort to identify license plates that are known for incidents that requires police engagement.
Are the mobile readers deployed evenly throughout the 9 patrol districts, or are they assigned to cars that have some other specific deployment pattern?
They are deployed to different vehicles. I can't say for sure whether we have these mobile devices in every district, but I can quickly find that information out for you. I do know that we have done our best to evenly distribute them. Specifically, which districts and how even, I don't have that information.
That's not time-sensitive information, but I would appreciate it if you could share with us a list of how many mobile readers are available to each of the 9 districts.
Okay.
Okay. In that case, Mr. President, I don't think I have any more questions for BPD, but I would like to comment that it might be worth a conversation with our state delegation. Oh, Gesundheit. It might be worth a conversation with the state delegation to look into having the state's restriction removed so that we have a broader pool of potential vendors.
Yeah, understood. Not really it's a restriction, but just at a high level, you want a golden source database. So I'm pretty sure this contract, as well as many other contracts from a statewide perspective, when you have inter-office and inter-jurisdiction connectivity, that it's important to have a standard. That way it makes the back end systems that the state kind of controls and manages much easier. So it's very standard for the state to set regulations, or even the federal government to set regulations. So there's a universal collection of data so that data can be scrubbed and processed and analyzed in the most efficient manner. I think I see the hand of Mr. Mayor raised.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. I was going to say basically what you just said, but also to say to the comptroller that we'll make sure that we get you and the president the breakdown of like the mobile and the stationary LPRs.
And sir, I do have some information. I apologize for interrupting. I do have some information on the cameras. We have a total of 32 fixed sites with a total of 87 LPR cameras within the city dispersed throughout the city. We do have 33 mobile units with 2 cameras on each vehicle, which would be a total of 66 cameras within our mobile units. I do not have the distribution, and I'll get that information for you. But those are the sort of summary note.
So that's 66 plus. What's the fixed ones?
So 32 fixed sites with a total of 87 cameras within those 32 fixed sites. And then 33 mobile units with 2 cameras on each vehicle, which would be a total of 66 cameras on the mobile units.
Got it. So we're talking about close to $3,000 a camera. Just
No, sir. No. The
no.
mobile, I'm sorry. The mobile cameras can be up to $10,000 per vehicle, per camera, excuse me.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So the 420,000, I just bashed the 420,000 up against the number of cameras that you communicated to us.
Okay. The 10,000 is for the acquisition of a new camera. What you're looking at is maintenance and operations of the existing cameras.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Understood. Thank you. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor of approving this item, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. Next up, Armed Security Services. On today's non-routine agenda, this item can be found on page 40. Item number 11, Metropolitan Protective Services Incorporated. This is a $4.5 million increase in extension to a contract number B50004352 to provide armed security services to a number of city agencies and facilities. If this item sounds familiar, it's because it's a similar extension for a smaller amount that was deferred at a previous BOE meeting. My understanding is that this item is before us because there are some agency critical needs that necessitate the extension while bidders are vetting for a longer term award, and that this increase is attributable to a larger part of ongoing pandemic activities. At this time, I'll turn the floor over to Ms. Keisha Brown from the Bureau of Procurement to speak on behalf of this item. And if there are any representatives from the agencies that are covered by the extension that wish to speak, you will be afforded the opportunity to do so after Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown, the floor is yours.
Good morning, President Mosby, Mayor Scott, Comptroller Henry, and other members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this contract. The Bureau of Procurement is asking for an extension of the contract, and the increase, as you articulated, is largely due to COVID-19 activities. We currently have a solicitation that is under evaluation, and we are hopeful to be able to present the board in the next couple of weeks with a recommendation for a new award.
So, Ms. Brown, currently there aren't any other city contracts that have minority participation or women participation currently on them as it relates to security?
I can speak to this particular contract. There were 0 goals on this particular contract, and when we went to we presented the specs to the chief of MBU, who's also on the call. There were also goals set for 0%. And that,
I guess my question, Ms. Brown, is could we, if there were other security contracts out there with the city to secure city buildings, could we use one of those that have actual MBE, WBE goals already baked in them, as opposed to this one that has them completely waived?
and respectfully, if you don't object, I would defer that to my colleague, Chief Miller in the MBU office.
Ms. Brown, I never object to you, so sure. Is Chief Miller on the call? I'm not sure if Chief Miller is on the call yet.
I can
I'm sorry, Matt, what did you say?
I said she is. I just received a message in the chat that she's present but having
Technical issues.
She's going to log out and come back in.
Okay. Ms. Brown, do you have anything else to add while we give a little time for Chief Miller to join back?
no, sir, I do not.
Okay. Well, for this item, because I think it's so important that Chief Miller kind of is able to participate in it, I'm going to just hold off and we're going to move on to our next item. We can come back to that at a later point of the meeting. So thank you, Ms. Brown. Please
Thank
stay
you.
up. All right, the next item, the final item won't be the final item anymore, but the next item on the non-routine agenda for today can be found on pages 43 and 44, item number 3, Bureau of Procurement Contract B5006180, bituminous paving materials, hot and cold patch. A protest of this contract awarded was received from Robert Fulton DeShiel on behalf of M. Louise Products LLC. A response to the protest was received from Gallagher Evelis Jones LLP on behalf of P. Flanagan and Sons Incorporated. We began to hear this protest last week before we were struck by technical difficulties. We thank all parties for coming back today. To begin, I want to give everyone time to briefly recap their position and their arguments and their concerns that were presented last week. Before we get into questions from the board, we will first hear from the Bureau of Procurement, Department of Transportation on this item, and then we will hear from the makers of the protest, followed by the respondents. At this time, I would like to recognize Mr. Michael Schrock from the City Law Department Contracts Division for any remarks he might have and wish to offer at this time. Mr.
Yes,
Schrock,
good
the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning, Honorable Board of Estimates. I thank you. As a recap, and just to go forward with this, I think what you have today is you have really 3 options that you're looking at. One is whether you, considering the testimony you'll hear today, and the questions and answers that you receive, whether you all believe you should reject all bids for items number 1, which is the cold patch, and item number 2, which is the hot patch. That is what M. Louise's position, I believe, is. There is a second option. You can award these item by item. So, for example, you could decide to award item 1, which I don't think there's really any questions about the quantities on that. And you could reject item 2 and rebid that. That's an option under the charter. The third option under the charter is what's been recommended by the Bureau of Procurement and also requested by Flanagan, and that is to award the full contract, item number 1 and 2, to the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. The lowest responsive and responsible bidder. What's come before you are some questions on the historical data, the estimates, and I'm going to defer to procurement and the Department of Transportation on that. One thing that I have noticed is that when we looked at the questions and answers for this bid, M. Louise, my understanding, did not ask for the volume of the sealant, which is in item 2, the hot patch. They did have questions on other volumes in that item, but not on the sealant in the Q&A. And that would have been the time to bring that up. Flanagan did bring that up as a question, and it was answered by procurement in the Q&A. Thirdly here, the competitive advantage has become a question that was been brought up by Mr. DeShiel. And we cited at our last meeting a case, and basically an incumbent bidder it has going to have some natural competitive advantages just doing the work for the city. So unless the Bureau of Procurement or DOT gives special information or preferential information that it should be giving to everybody else, then that competitive advantage is not something that you all would consider. It's just a natural part of having the contract. As the other side has brought up, M. Louise also currently has the emergency contract. So it does know some data of what the city's usage is, at least in the time that they've had that contract. And they're both very responsive and responsible bidders overall in the industry. They know the industry, and they do a great job. So with that, I would also just say, finally, that the other side did bring up that, there was a prior October 2020 bid. We only had 2 bidders, Flanagan and also M. Louise, that bid on that. Flanagan at that point, I believe, was the lowest responsible bidder, but that was rebid as there, I believe, and Keisha could go further than that, but I think there was a thing that they wanted to relook at the solicitation and go out with it again, which they did, which we're looking here now for the March 2021 bid that's before us. Both times Flanagan's been the lowest bidder. And in this current bid, even if you look at the sealant, which there's a very large bid price from M. Louise at 52 million, I believe about. Even if you put that down to a penny, Flanagan would still win item 2, the hot patch. So just for your consideration, those are things I want to bring up. It's basically up to your decision, listening to the facts today and the responses. I mean, unless there's fraud or collusion or arbitrary conduct in this transaction, this solicitation and award, the courts are not going to overrule your decision. And that's just from case law. I mean, that's Fuller versus Elderkin, Maryland Court Appeals. So that's all I have at the moment, and I appreciate your time.
No, we appreciate you, Mr. Schrock. One quick question. You laid out three options. Is there a fourth option where the board can decide to proceed with both bidders for both 1 and 2 tasks?
Not as currently bid, no, because you have to give it by item to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. And if you look at item 1, Flanagan is the lowest bidder. You look at item 2, currently Flanagan is the lowest bidder. So there's no way that currently as bid, M. Louise could win either of those. It would have to be rebid and then allow all bidders on one or more of those items to rebid.
So I thought that was the case, but I guess I was a little confused on your option number 2, Mr. Schrock, when you said that we could award one task to M. Louise and another task to Flanagan. So could you explain that process?
Yeah, if I misspoke and said that, I was mistaken. It's not that you necessarily could award it to M. Louise at the bids that were provided you. You could decide to award item 1 to one of the bidders who's the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, and you could decide to item 2 to reject all bids on that and rebid it out, because you have the ability per this in the charter to just award item by item.
Understood. Gotcha. Now we're on the same page. At this point, are there, and then Ms. Brown, before we get into any additional questions or concerns or hear from both parties, what's the delta between the 2 items as far as the lowest bid and the other bid? Do you know the difference in bid amount?
So for item 1, there's approximately the first item that was bidded for Flanagan, item 1 is $2,475,000. On M. Louise, line item 1 is $2,773,500.
So a difference of $300,000, right?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
And then on line item 2 for M. Louise, the line item is for $56,206,000. And for Flanagan, it is line item 2, $2,595,300.
Say those 2 numbers again. I'm sorry.
So P. Flanagan,
Yeah, it's
$595,300.
2.5 versus.
That's line item 2.
Yeah.
And M. Louise is $56,206,000.
So a delta of 54 million, well, 53 million plus dollars.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right. Thank you for that, Ms. Brown. I think in the interest of time, and as I stated, we're going to allow both the protest as a respondent to kind of give us a recap of where we were last week. I think I see the hand of Comptroller Henry Yes, Mr. Comptroller.
Mr. President, before we get to the protestant and responders, I did have one question for either procurement or the agency.
And you can answer. Yep.
Pardon? Yeah, I'm still trying to understand why this contract requested a quote on 30,000 tons of sealant. You know, and I have a copy of the Q&A for the bid, where I think it looks like somebody from P. Flanagan was asking that question also, and the answer is not. There's no real clear explanation for why we requested enough TAC to cover 10,000 lane miles of roadway. And so I was wondering if we could address that on the city side before we get into the specifics of why this is being protested and why and how the awardee is responding.
So either someone from Department of Transportation, I see Director Sharkey, or I guess Ms. Brown. Is anyone prepared to answer Comptroller Henry's question?
I like to do the initial, and I'm happy to defer to the director in terms of their needs. But the solicitation, Comptroller Henry speaks to this and our type of contract that we desire to go into for this commodity. And it was a requirements contract. And clearly under the scope of work, paragraph B, it describes the requirement contracts, which is basically saying the quantity contained herein are for equal competitive bidding, evaluation, and award purposes only. They represent the city's best estimate of requirements. However, the actual quantities ordered may be more or less. And to your question, there was an inquiry about the city. Did we make a mistake in saying 30,000 tons? The procurement professional responded appropriately by referencing this particular line item of the solicitation, identifying that it was our intent to go into a requirements contract, which is a city contracting practice for indefinite quantities.
Ms. Brown, and I'm going to go right back to you, Mr. Comptroller, but Ms. Brown, when a respondent to a bid asks a question and there's an appropriate answer or response back from the city, is that provided to all potential bidders?
Absolutely.
So that Q&A is provided to everyone?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Comptroller, I'm sorry, back to you.
No, that's okay. I appreciate we're both trying to, work around the edges of this, trying to, okay, I'm just going to say it plainly. It sounds like we asked a hypothetical. It sounds like we said, hey, if we needed 30,000 tons of it, how much would it cost? Not because we intend to actually buy 30,000 tons, but just out of curiosity, if we needed 30,000 tons, how much would you charge us for that? Is that normal? Do we do that a lot?
Yes, that's industry practice. It's called an IDQ. So it's an indefinite quantity contract. It's a contract type. So basically it puts the city in a better position that if there's some additional initiatives we didn't foresee coming in the next 5 years, which is approximately the term of this contract, that we would lower our risk in contracting and pricing and have that commodity available to us. So that was our intent for utilizing that evaluation standard in this contract.
So this kind of goes to what, I'm sorry, Mr. Schock? Okay. Schrock, I'm sorry. Yeah,
No,
you're just
fine.
Michael. You're just Michael on my screen. So
Yeah,
but I was trying to be respectful.
I probably should change that, Comptroller.
I was like, that kind of goes, or maybe I should be asking this as a question. Is that part of what he was describing as the sort of natural advantage of the incumbent or you said this is an industry standard. So in theory, you're saying all bidders would know that even though you might be asking this hypothetical, the chances of actually, the city actually trying to require this. Oh, okay, but you still have to put the actual price in the bid. So the delta, that delta of $50 million, that delta exists because P. Flanagan can literally produce 30,000 tons of tack coat for the city's use at a penny a ton compared to the retail price that M. Louise put in their bid. Is that what this boils down to? Mr. President, I'm not sure who I should be addressing that question.
Yeah, Director Sharkey or Ms. Brown, I would assume one of you, if anybody on the line can answer that, would be able to answer that. But that is the $1 million question, Mr. Comptroller.
So P. Flanagan actually.
I should have said that's the $50 million question.
So P. Flanagan actually makes the sealant, whereas M. Louise Products has to buy it from somebody. And so P. Flanagan, if they're using it for a contract with the city, they're going to just charge, they're going to put that on the bid as their cost. Whereas if M. Louise is doing this, they're going to include in their bid their cost to buy that stuff, which includes the markup of the producer. So this sounds like this just boils down to P. Flanagan has a substantial competitive advantage in the market because they make the product.
Ms. Brown or Director Sharkey, can you kind of speak to that?
Sure. Steve, you're muted.
Director Sharkey, you're muted.
I mean, I would prefer not to. I don't know who has in-house capabilities and who does not. I do not know their operations well enough to know how they bid.
And as opposed to putting the city on the hook for that, Mr. Comptroller, we will hear from the protest side as well as the respondent, and I think that that's a very appropriate question to ask at that particular time.
For the record, I'm assuming they make it if they're charging a penny a ton.
All right, so we're going to go at this time. We're going to go, like I stated, so we can have a recap of last week to both the protester as well as the respondent. So I guess, Mr. DeShiel, I know that you led the discussion on your side last week. Mr. DeShiel, if you would like to speak or if you would like to defer this time to anyone else from an M. Louise perspective, the floor is yours at this point.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning again to other members of the board. And I am going to defer to the CEO of M. Louise Products LLC, but I want to say one thing. It is not industry standard to state an arbitrary quantity when the bid document says it's supposed to be the best estimate. That is of quantities. This has nothing to do with whether or not it's an IDR contract or indefinite quantities. This has to do with whether or not you're going to fulfill your stated goal, your stated purpose of giving the best estimate of the quantities that you're going to use. It's not a guaranteed. There's no guarantee, as Ms. Brown said. There's no guarantee one way or the other. But you give your best estimate because the responders use that estimate to arrive at their bid price. You just can't willy-nilly throw a number out there saying, oh, well, let's see what the world will offer. By doing that, you basically tell bidders, disregard this altogether and rely on your own experience. Well, as it turns out, there's only one company that has that experience. That is the flip side of the coin of giving information to only one bidder. Providing a bid document that only one bidder has information that's relevant is the same consequence. It is exactly the same. With that, I would turn the floor over if I
may.
Real quick,
Mr. DeShiel, before we go to the CEO, when you say has that experience, what experience are you specifically talking about in this bid?
I'm talking about the knowledge of the actual quantities that the city is likely to purchase. That is critical. And M. Louise didn't get that knowledge from a winter contract that they had for 6 months on an emergency basis that nearly no purchases have been made under. On the other hand, Flanagan that's provided the service for many, many, and this is not a criticism of Flanagan. This is not to say that a bidder has to not use knowledge or experience that it's gained over many, many years. But when you, the owner, know that there's only one bidder that has that, you shouldn't advantage them more by giving an arbitrary estimate of the quantity. You should do exactly what you say you're going to do. Give the best estimate. And there's no way in the world that the city ever intended to buy enough tact to cover not 10,000 miles, Mr. Comptroller, 26,000 miles of surfacing. It's just so when you do that, you advantage you take away the levelness of the playing field. Because when you've only got two bidders, and there are only two bidders on this contract, the bidder who has the knowledge of how much the city is likely to use is able to use its knowledge in a situation where no other bidder can because no other bidder has it.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. DeShiel. Before we go to you, Ms. Louise, I do see the hand of our city solicitor, Solicitor Shea. Do you have a question or comment to add?
I do have a question for Mr. DeShields. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair.
I noted in your supplemental submission that you said that M. Louise had asked for the historical data of the usage of these sealant, these components. I didn't see that question in the Q&A from M. Louise. How did M. Louise ask, and if so, how?
M. Louise did not ask a specific question about the quantity because it had already been asked. The question was asked by P. Flanagan, and the answers to that question are available to all the bidders. So M. Louise would simply have been repeating the question that had already been asked and had no reason to believe they wouldn't get the same answer that P. Flanagan got, which was a non-answer.
No, I understand that. I was asking a slightly different question, which is to the historical usage that perhaps Flanagan or others had as to what had been used in prior contracts. Did M. Louise ask for that information?
As I said, that M. Louise did not ask that specific question because it had already been asked.
No, sir.
Given to Flanagan.
I'm not making myself clear. There is a set of data that you say only Flanagan has, which is how much was used in a prior contract.
Correct.
Did M. Louise ask for that data? Because both Flanagan and DOT had that.
I thought I'd answered it. What I said was M. Louise did not ask that specific question because it had already been asked.
Let me try to clear up the miscommunication we're having right now. So I think what the solicitor is asking Mr. DeShiel is, it was stated that there was one contractor that was in a better position because they had worked on these contracts for quite some time. And because of that institutional knowledge of those contracts, they were provided a certain level of historical information on exactly the quantities that would be needed. And that was ultimately impacted the outcome of their bid. Whereas M. Louise, who you're representing today, had only had a really small part of the contract for 6 months and didn't necessarily have the historical data. So we understand and know that there was a question about the indefinite amount of quantities, the 30,000 that we've talked about. I think the question from the city solicitor, at any point in time, did M. Louise turn to the city of Baltimore and ask for any historical data associated with these types of contracts and what the outcomes were in the past?
All right, let me repeat the answer again. The questions that are asked by each prospective bidder are posted on City Buy. So when P. Flanagan asked the question about quantities, M. Louise knew that the question had already been asked, and had no reason to believe that the answer, if it repeated the same question, would be any different than the answer that the city gave to P. Flanagan.
Yeah, but with all due respect, Mr. DeShiel, that is not what is being asked. What is being asked is what were the quantities over the past 5 years, over the past 10 years, to specifically lay out, to provide an extra set of information, not the question that's part of the Q&A that Flanagan asked that all responsive bidders were able to kind of see. So the assumption is at this point that historic data was never collected from a city Baltimore perspective, nor provided to M. Louise.
I think I said that M. Louise did not ask that specific question because it was aware of the fact that the question had already been asked, and it was aware of the answer that had already been given.
Yeah, but the question was never asked.
Yes, it was.
There's
It was
nobody.
asked by Flanagan.
No, there is no historical data question part of the Q&A. That you can't tell me in 2018 how much was used versus 2017. I think that was the crux of the question that was asked from Mr. City Solicitor. Is that accurate, City Solicitor? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, you phrased it better than I. That's exactly my question.
So the assumption is we don't know what those quantities were from historical data in the past. We only know the answer to a question that Flanagan asked. Mr. Comptroller, I saw your hand raised. Do you have a question or comment regarding this issue?
I was just going to mention that I have in front of me the some of the questions from the Q&A, and there are several questions from P. Flanagan specifically asking about the sealant or the tack code.
Correct.
And I think this is what Mr. DeShields is referring to.
Correct.
Flanagan asked specific questions.
Correct.
Can you verify the quantity in this bid?
Correct.
Tack code is generally sold in 5-gallon buckets.
Yes.
Are you asking? Are you asking for a price on 30,000 tons of tack code? Yeah, these questions are in the Q&A. I think what
but they're not specific to we can kind of move along, Mr. Comptroller, but they're not specific to the question that the city solicitor was asking. And I think that was the difficulty in the exchange we just had. So
the point I was going to make to Mr. DeShields is that there would never have been a reason for P. Flanagan to put in the Q&A
correct
how much sealant has been used in the past.
Correct.
Because Flanagan was doing the contract. And
exactly.
so was there a reason why M. Louise did not put that into the chat, into the Q&A themselves, asking to publicize for all potential bidders how much sealant do you usually really need?
Again, Mr. Comptroller, I think I understand the question. I thought I understood it when Mr. Shea asked it. And the questions asked by P. Flanagan went directly to whether or not the city really intended to buy 30,000 tons of this sealant, right? That was the question. The answer and that question was known to all the bidders, including M. Louise. The answer that the city gave was, don't worry about it. We're just giving this quantity for bidding purposes only. But the problem is that's not what the bid document says. The bid document says you're going to give your best estimate. Now, when you don't give your best estimate and you just throw a number out there, for whatever reason you use that number, then you're asking the bidders then to rely on whatever information they've acquired in whatever way they've acquired it. As it turns out, the only one of the bidders who had ever had an opportunity to acquire information about what that historical utilization may have been was Flanagan. That's our point. And that we think that that there was a mistake made in not giving an estimate that better reflected the actual utilization, which the city knew and withheld in spite of the fact that they had been asked directly by one of the bidders to provide it.
I see the hand of City Solicitor, Mr. Shea, the floor is yours.
With a little trepidation, I have another question, Mr. President, if that's all right.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Shields, there are three subparts to this item 2. bid, correct? There's the surface, the base, or which are A and B, and sealant, which is C. And each bidder gave a price for each of the three items. And the huge discrepancy occurred on item C, where the bid from Flanagan was very low, 300 or 3,000, very low number, and a very high number from M. Louise. If we gave M. Louise the credit, allowed it to rebid, and took its price on item C down to P. Flanagan's, isn't it true that P. Flanagan would still have the lowest bid?
If the quantities, if the quantity given by the city only affected the bid for that item and not the other items that were required to perform the service. And I'm going to, at this point, defer to Natalia Luis, the CEO, to explain how not having a best estimate of the quantities for TAC affected the other items that were required as a part of that product, as a part of that response.
I appreciate that.
Now you're in the area, you've reached a level of technical expertise that's beyond my pay grade.
Well, it's way beyond mine, way beyond mine. My only point is if you took sealant and let M. Louise put that at zero, Flanagan still has the lowest bid on this whole thing. And that's leaving aside any technical explanation that may exist. We will hear from the CEO on that.
Yeah, I guess the point is the amount of quantity we'll use affects labor hours and affects other things. So would potentially inflate other sides of other estimates associated with that same project or job. Madam CEO,
But it would, if I could just ask, it inflated for both bidders.
Yeah, but if one bidder is using, say, historical data or using the institutional knowledge that's not associated with the 30,000 tons versus the one that is, all of the numbers will be inflated associated with that amount.
Okay, that's fair enough.
So, Madam CEO, Luis, you have been waiting patiently. Thank you. The floor is yours now.
Thank you. I'd like to address a couple of questions and try to create a little bit of clarity. First of all, just in this last statement of items A, B, and C, and C being the only item that has a huge discrepancy, that's not the case. Item B, asphalt base, also has a huge discrepancy. Flanagan bid it at $16 a ton. $16 doesn't cover the liquid asphalt cost, which entails 5% of the mass, but 50% of the cost of making asphalt. So that was an egregiously low number. If $30,000 were to be, now I'm not telling Flanagan how to bid. They can bid any which way they want. But I'm telling you right now, mathematically, according to the stated state price for liquid asphalt, $16 isn't even covered per ton. So that item was not going to be used. And M. Lewis did ask questions as to the asphalt quantities. So we didn't ask the sealant question because it had been answered already by Flanagan. I'd like to make it clear that likely the reason that Flanagan asked that question was the same as to why we would have been asking that question. The question was because the spec changed from the first time they bid this contract, and it got rejected because the mix designs did not even meet state specifications. But from that time, they changed the sealant spec. They changed the sealant from being tack that you laid down with machine to do, for instance, a mill and overlay. You have a tack truck. That sealant is a different specification. It is measured by tons. Albeit 30,000 tons would have covered 26,000 lane miles and would have still been high, it would have been appropriately measured by tons. That was on the first bid. On the second bid, they changed that sealant spec for patching sealant. And when that happened, They changed a spec that is ordinarily purchased in 5-gallon buckets that cost $40 to $50 a bucket. And they kept the tonnage volume. And the response, incredulously, I'm sure, to Flanagan and to us, was that the contractor or the bidder could opt to extrapolate the gallons needed in order to get to the tonnage price. Well, at $40 to $50 a ton, a bucket that holds 5 gallons, that extrapolation was $1,750 per ton. The city knew how egregious that was. The city also knew how egregiously they had over or under quantified each and every one of the items, because Flanagan's bid is only for $5 million. And yet, not only is the city recommending award to Flanagan, they're recommending award for a total of $20 million, 4 times the size of that bid. Nowhere in the documents did it say that those quantities were for 1 year or for 5 years, but apparently now it's for 1 year and they're doing a 4 or 5 year outcome. That was at least based on just the recommendation to award $20 million. The city is acknowledging that it under-quantified the bid at least 4 times. As it pertains to each item being bid, if you took out the sealant and M. Lewis would still lose all the bids. Well, I'm going to challenge you, because if you told me that you actually intended to use 100,000 tons of surface, I could have negotiated better with my liquid asphalt distributors and with my aggregate suppliers. And instead of my price being $45, it could have been $40 and I would have beat out Flanagan. And if you had told me that really we're not doing the base, we don't like to do that with our internal depots, we're going to use 5,000 tons of base and 100,000 tons of surface and 30,000 tons of cold mix, you can bet your bottom dollar my pricing would have changed. Because I may have risked, I may have made the same decision that Flanagan do, which was to basically assume I wasn't going to get any base at all and put $16 on it just to barely cover the liquid asphalt, which, by the way, you don't have a liquid asphalt variability item in this contract. That liquid asphalt moves every month according to the state stipulation. It's on every other contract you have. This is an asphalt contract. How could you not have that in there? So the sealant spec changed. The item was egregious to begin with, the item quantity. The unit price made it so unreasonable and irrational that Flanagan, basically knowing that it was so unreasonable and irrational, put a penny on it. By the way, they don't make the sealant. Neither does any other asphalt manufacturer. That comes from the oil refiners. We all purchase that. So there's no, it was the city forced Flanagan to put a penny on it and forced us to put the market price on it by being so egregious in the quantities. And I can't agree with Mr. Shea on well, take out the sealant and you still lose the bid. Well, tell me that you're going to do 100,000 tons of surface and I'm going to get you to $40 a ton and beat Flanagan's price. Tell me you don't intend to do the asphalt base. And we asked those questions. We asked, how much asphalt have you historically used? We emailed them and we put them on city buy. The other thing is there's no MB or WBE on this. There are opportunities for hauling aggregate, for hauling sealant, for brokering aggregates. There are suppliers who are MBE and WBE. That would be me. Flanagan could easily use any hauler any asphalt broker, any liquid asphalt supplier to obtain those MBE goals without having to use what they might perceive as a competitor, and would be fair and rational for them not to consider using us. And we would also have the opportunity to be more inclusive. And you know, lastly, I know this has nothing to do with this, but folks, I have to reiterate to you again, this contract and the way that you plan to award it to one single bidder, I don't know any other jurisdiction that does that. Baltimore County doesn't do it. The state doesn't do it. Montgomery County doesn't do it. I don't think Prince George's County does it. The reason why you want multiple awardees is because you want to make sure that the plant that is closest to the job site where your internal depots are working is the one that's used. It saves you on the hauling. So your teams, the team of 12 people, 10, 12 people that you have there working aren't sitting around for a 3-hour round robin. Because if you can shorten that to a 1-hour turnaround, your teams are working all day, being more productive, creating a cost efficiency to the city. And in a moment of crisis, of economic crisis, where so many people are suffering, are we really willing to go out there and say, hey, I've got a job in, you know, Southeast Baltimore City, but I'm going to go to West Side to Monroe Street, and in traffic, have at least a 2-hour turnaround to get back to the job to do this work. It doesn't make any sense. No other jurisdiction does it, and they don't do it because it doesn't make any sense. So I know that has nothing to do with this contract per se and how it's written, because it's written for one vendor, but it's the irresponsibility of awarding to one bidder. And by the way, if I was the low bidder, I might not raise my hand and tell you that, but if you ask me, I'd tell you the truth. And the truth is, it's irresponsible to award this contract to one single vendor.
Thank you.
Already.
Thank you, Ms. Louise. We've heard your points. We appreciate it. Despite where we are, there was significant amount of time and attention from city resources. That doesn't mean that we are right, and clearly that's why we're talking about this. But want to ensure that the motivations of the members of government are upheld. But I think you raised some really, really important points, and we appreciate you doing so. So please stay on the line. Not seeing any specific questions because we have plenty from M. Louise's perspective. We're going to turn the floor over to the respondent representatives from Flanagan. If at this point, I believe Paul Cilia, pronounce your name for me, sir.
Yes, President Mosby, it's Keola.
Oh, Keola. All right. So Paul Keola is going to represent Flanagan. The floor is yours, just like we did with M. Louise. Mr. Keola, you can speak. You can defer to other individuals, part of your team, but please lay out your response associated with this protest.
Thank you, President Mosby. And good morning, Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Council President, Mr. Comptroller, and members of the board. There's no dispute that Flanagan is the lowest responsible and responsive bidder, and M. Louise does not dispute that fact. M. Louise has been providing asphalt on a no-bid emergency basis since September of 2020, and does have some experience during that period. Yes, winter was included in that period, but so was September and October and November and March. M. Louise would like the city to reject all bids because M. Louise, at a higher price than Flanagan has bid, is currently supplying asphalt. And during the next month or 2 months or 3 months until there's another bid, M. Louise will continue to be supplying asphalt to the city at its higher prices. Now, we attached to our response a bid comparison. And if Mr. Stegman, if you would allow me to share my screen. I'm now sharing my screen. This is the what you see here is Flanagan's bid in black, and then the Flanagan staff has added the M. Luis bid in red. And so item 2 is the item that M. Luis has complained about. It's item 2B and item 2C, and you can see the difference in prices there. But item 2A, you can see that Flanagan was a couple $100,000 lower on that item. And then if we scroll up to item 1, we have item 1A, and that is Flanagan's 150,000 lower on that item, and item 1B, Flanagan's a couple $100,000 lower on that item. So there are 5 items here, and all 5 include Flanagan as the low bidder. On the issue of one bid affecting others, each of these is just a supply. There is no labor in any of these items. So we're talking about supply and occasional hauling if the city doesn't pick up from the plant, which is the norm. Flanagan uses MBE truckers when there's hauling. When they do hauling under this contract, historically, that's what they've used. So even though there's no MBE requirement, in fact, that's Flanagan's practice. So when there's hauling, MBEs would be used, but this is a supply contract, and that's why there was no MBE component to it. I think it's important that the point that the city solicitor was asking is important. The importance of the fact that the historic quantities was never used is that the appropriate time to raise that point was pre-bid opening, not post-bid opening. Post-bid opening, it's being used because M. Luis wasn't the low bidder. So they're looking for an excuse to have the contract rebid. Had they raised the historic use question, maybe they would have received an answer, but they didn't, and the appropriate time to do so was before the bid opening. They failed to do that, and so that whole argument on the tack coat historic usage is just a sideshow. The case law, I think, is informative. Last week and this week, the city law department has relied on this JL Industries case. And I just like to read from just briefly from that case, because I think it's been used improperly by M. Luis. The point of the case, and this is a quote, "The state is not required to equalize competition by considering the competitive advantage which may accrue to particular bidders because of their prior experience or particular circumstances. Rather, the test to be applied is whether the competitive advantage enjoyed by a particular firm would be the result of a preference or unfair action by the government." And then the case goes on to say, give an example. It says, if a bidder is provided information by the government that allows that bidder to adjust its bid, and that information is not shared with all bidders. So if there had been a question on city buy and only the answer only went to one party, that would be an example of unfair government action. But the government does not need to equalize the playing field in terms of historic experience. That is not considered unfair, and it is not the basis for a bid protest. M. Luis also cited a separate case, Capital Dental from 1987. That case is completely inapplicable. That case deals with a party that was not responsive in its bid, and that the city, or that jurisdiction was willing to overlook the non-responsiveness and award the contract anyway. Those are not the facts we have here. And so we believe there is no valid legal basis for this bid protest, and that the city should award the the contract to Flanagan on both items 1 and items 2. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
At this time, the floor is open for any questions for Mr. Keola. Hearing and seeing no questions for the Flanagan side. And Mr. Keola, I assume that you're the only party talking for Flanagan this morning, correct?
That's correct,
Oh,
President
okay.
Mosby.
Thank you for your time and your presentation. I do have a couple quick questions. I guess some questions that were raised. The bid was around like $5 million. The bid was around $5 million. The award is for $20 million. That fourfold increase, I guess, Ms. Brown, is that something standard that we do? How does that happen?
I heard that conversation. Can you please tell me what exactly you're referencing? Are you referencing the bid sheets?
I think that was a point that was raised by CEO Luis that this contract is for $20 million.
Yes, and that was the consideration where it was an oversight, I'm assuming, that it was identified that the contract term was not advertised, and it was. So under section term of agreement, SW2, which is our scope of work, it states that the contract shall be for a term for 3 years, and the contract shall contain options to renew on the same terms for 2 additional 1 year at the sole discretion of the city of Baltimore. So those calculations were considered and ultimately coming to the board to ask for this award.
Thank you for that, clearing up that issue. The next question is, I heard from Mr. Keola that supply contracts generally do not carry MBE, WBE goals. Is that accurate? If so, why?
Typically commodity and goods, folks like to interchange them, commodities, goods and services. Services typically carry those goals because of a way to segment, but when it's straight commodity, typically you do not have goals on it because the supplier is basically providing you a good.
Even when the good has excessive amount of labor associated with it, when we talk about like the transportation and the heavy hauling of the aggregates and the sealants and supplies.
Correct. So if they were actually delivering to our site, and again, I don't want to speak for Chief Miller, but I would presume that she would segment that and maybe put goals on it. But this contract was bidded prior to my coming to the city, so I don't know what that dialogue was at the time.
Understood. But for this contract, maybe, but definitely in the future, when there are these large community supply type of contracts that will incur a tremendous amount of hauling associated with that material, there could realistically be MBE, WBE goals assigned to them. Is that a fair statement?
I believe so, and also to iterate that the Bureau of Procurement, as well as my working with IMBU, that we share the vision of the city and the direction in which Mayor Scott and this board is going. So we certainly give that credence when we're evaluating under specs, rather there should be goals set or not. But under these conditions, I'm not for certain of the conversation and how this came about with no goals. But certainly in the future, unless labor is included, there potentially may not be an avenue to segment goals, but if there were, I am more than confident that we would add goals to it.
Thank you. Next question. When we talk about this competitive multi-bid environment, when do we choose to have bidders assigned to particular contracts as opposed to just choosing one? And is this the type of contract that we would never do that? If so, why? If you could kind of go through that for our knowledge.
Okay, for charter purposes, I will let, if you don't mind, again, Attorney Schrock speak to that. But however, in the bidding process, which is the procurement process, we individually evaluate each one. And the ultimate rule of the goal is what is in the best interest of the city.
But there are instances where we identify multiple successful bidders and we kind of pick and choose based off of the job who kind of does that particular job. Is that accurate?
That's a possibility, yes.
So when is there an advantage for the city to do that versus to just have a single bid awarded?
Well, if there's not a continuity in services and it may impact that, we wouldn't do a multiple award. But again, that's an individual judgment during the evaluation of the bid and also to stay in line with the method of award.
Yes. Now, Director Sharkey, do you see for a bid of this size and with these types of tasks, is this a bid that in the future could be opened up to multiple bidders being awarded? Or do you foresee some type of operational functionality problem in doing this all?
I mean, I've seen things like first call, second call before, where if the first person can't supply, the second one comes in. So that's could always be a possibility. So, you know, if you call them up and they say, we don't have any asphalt, you got to go to the second guy. But I haven't seen too many contracts like this. It could be done. Of course, I'm sure then every time each other got called, there'd be a call from the lawyers to each other person. So it's a lot easier with one.
Now, Director Sharkey, are you speaking specific to the city of Baltimore? Or are you also saying at the state level, which you have significant experience at, that was the same case there?
I was not, I did not work for the state.
You were at the state, no? I thought you left and went to, I'm so sorry. All right,
No.
but I'll rephrase my question. Director Sharkey, are you saying that specific to Baltimore, like you have not seen that here, or industry practice having multiple options for the city to choose from, task by task, job by job, inside of a large contract like this, that's not the appropriate, and from your opinion, the appropriate way to kind of handle a contract like this?
I'm trying to think of things, but you kind of put me on the spot. So
I'm sorry. All right. Well, let's think. All right, because I do know of contracts in the past, particularly on the state, where there were multiple vendors, and definitely in the government side where there's multiple vendors awarded, and it's kind of job by job, task by task that we would pull out. I think the school system also kind of has very large contracts where they have multiple vendors inside of they call it something when they package up a contract and have multiple vendors inside. So Director Sharkey, if you could look into that, as well as I'm pretty sure Director Garbark, you might have some knowledge or background or information for some of your large contracts about it. The only other question I have for you, Ms. Brown, is around this indefinite quantity concern. Again, I think we said that that's pretty standard. Are there lessons learned here, with the 30,000 tons of sealant? Do we typically run into this issue when we're talking about these competitive bids, or does these particular concerns between these two vendors, this is kind of an anomaly?
Right. And in that regards, I would offer the opportunity to debrief with M. Louise. I certainly hear their concerns, and that would be our lesson learned and our hot washing of our solicitation. But at the time of the award, clearly we were articulating an estimate more or less for requirements. Had that question come in, and for lessons learned as well for the supplier community, specifically asked for our forecasted amount or our historical, at no time did the Bureau of Procurement refuse to provide that information. It was not specifically asked of us. The question was asked, are you mistaking? And our response was no, and referred to the section that I quoted from earlier.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? I see the hand raised of Mr. Comptroller. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I realized I was remiss. I did still have a question for Mr. Keola that probably is best addressed to Flanagan and not to somebody in the city. And I apologize if I'm kind of stuck on this, but I'm having trouble getting past this 1 cent per ton price on the sealant compared to M. Louise's bid of $1,755 per ton. How is Flanagan able to provide the sealant so cheaply?
Comptroller Henry, Flanagan is not able to, they don't manufacture the tack coat. So they would have to buy it and they would lose money should the city actually purchase as much as is listed. So Flanagan, Flanagan is willing to run that risk and accepts the contract as it bid it. It does not believe it's likely the city would ever order that quantity. And so it bid based on its understanding of what is likely to occur, running the risk that if the city did order that much tack coat, it would have a loss.
Oh, okay. So 1 cent per ton is not what Flanagan expects to acquire the sealant at. It's just being kind of upfront about the fact that it's willing to eat the cost of the sealant.
That's correct.
Huh. Okay.
So I think, I'm sorry, go ahead, Comptroller.
Well, I was going to say that was, and this is where I'll look over at our city solicitor as just a reminder of the fact that I sometimes say in conversation, I'm not a lawyer. This is a clear example of that because I happily ask questions all the times that I don't know the answers to. And this one was so far, the answer was so far away from what I was expecting that I'm happy to momentarily turn the floor back over to the president before I move on to my next question.
Well, herein lies the problem that I've seen over the past 4 months, and I think that we're gonna have to develop a way of aggressively addressing. But this idea that lowest bid wins. This idea that we're supposed to have the best estimate bid, and this idea that this board consistently awards change orders to the contract similar to this is problematic, to say the least. I will state that with no clear nefarious motivation or anything from a Flanagan perspective, when you take a 30,000 foot level of something that costs the amount of what the sealant costs, and someone puts a 1 cent per amount price on their actual bid, and that's extrapolated to a bid amount, and we're looking at it as lowest bid, it appears that there is not any comparable or objective in doing an analysis of what the lowest bid is, because one person decided to take a total different and creative approach to it where a person did not. My assumption is that if this was to be awarded today, that there will be a tremendous amount of scrutiny on finishing these projects at cost, and that there would not be any excessive increases associated with them over the course of the 4 years that they're awarded. But again, this goes back to the crux of this issue around the way the city charter is structured, the way this board has operated for centuries or decades. That lowest bid always wins, because you really count out the subjective nature of the way that these bids are kind of done, and we allow for creativity. But then on the back end, we also are awarding and extending and providing, work orders and change orders. So again, that is not to disparage anything that Flanagan did. That's not to say that there was any ill intent or any motivation in doing so. But I do think it's extremely problematic when we're in this environment of lowest bid is always the winner. With that, I think you have an additional question, Mr. Comptroller?
I do, but I'm happy to yield until the mayor asks his.
You have a question, Mr. Mayor? You're on mute, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear us?
I can. Thank you. WebEx is being WebEx. Mr. President, thank you for recognizing me. I was going to simply say, just to reiterate to your point about lowest bidder and how the contract and procurement system is, that is exactly why we are going to be working with both you and the comptroller and our other colleagues on the council to reform it. We know that we have to do this system over from top to bottom because we should be really looking towards best value for the city of Baltimore and not always who comes in the lowest.
Yeah, and I've been drumming that beat for quite some time, Mr. Mayor. So I think we already have some ideas in the works that we'll probably be coming to sit down and talk to you to look at from a legislative perspective, the things that we are going to undertake. But to turn attention back on to B5006180 at this time, Mr. Comptroller, I think you have some additional questions or concerns.
I do, sir. Thank you. But the remaining question I have, it would really benefit from having Chief Miller available. Is she on the call yet?
No, I don't think that from a network perspective, she has been able to get back on since she had to drop.
What was that?
Is that Chief Miller?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry.
Hey.
I was able to get back and restore my connection. Thank you.
Hi, Chief Miller. So the floor is yours, Mr.
Good morning.
Good morning. So this is what I wanted to ask about the fact that DOT had sought a waiver from MBU for this work, and given that the recommended awardee has already noted that they do effectively segment the work by providing hauling subcontracting to MBEs. My question was, why didn't we require MBE and WBE goals for this contract? Since appears to be an acknowledgement from both the recommended awardee and the protestant that they think this work could be segmented for subcontractors.
When we reviewed the initial specs that were sent to us when we did the review initially, the majority of the contract dollars were being directed to the asphalt as the manufactured commodity. And hauling was only listed, I believe, at 10%. And based on how the transport of the asphalt had to be performed, the company that would provide that hauling ordinarily would have to have certain types of equipment and trucking in order to accommodate the materials that had to be hauled from one location to the next. And they were not actually hauling asphalt, they were actually hauling hot asphalt. That's how it was written. And so when we did the evaluation, we based it solely on the commodity, since that's where the bulk of the city's money was going to go, which was into the purchase of the manufactured good. And in a case like that, as Chief Keisha Brown mentioned, with the commodity, we very seldom put goals on it because we're dealing with the manufactured goods. And that's how we did, when we conducted the evaluation, that's what we did. But of course, if it's something that we may have overlooked as it relates to the hauling aspect, then I would like to know more about that. But of course, I'm very clear that when we did the initial review, we were looking at it based on the total investment dollars of this award, which would be going to the commodity.
Well, thank you for laying that out, because what I was thinking back to was, it seems like just a couple of weeks ago that we dealt with what feels to me a similar contract dealing with salt, where technically the contract was for the acquisition of the commodity of the salt, but we had MBE goals in there because there was some hauling involved, and that was how we dealt with the fact that the goals hadn't been hit, because there hadn't been as much need for hauling as we had expected, given the weather. So I guess I am, and this this may be less a question for Embu and more a question for another part of the law department, is at this stage of the game, if we the board have question whether or not a waiver is really appropriate for a contract, is our only, I guess our only option would be to reject all bids and rebid it with MBE goals. And so I guess that's what I'm inclined to throw out here is it seems like this contract should have had some MBE WB attainment required in it. And given the issue that the CEO of M. Louise raised about the idea of multiple contractors being able to do different parts of the city and be more efficient in their operations depending on where their base is, that sounds like a really sensible concept for us to be discussing in terms of how we administer a contract like this. So my only question is, do we just put this on the list of things that we want to make sure we do better next time? Or do we want to say, well, let's just pause here and make sure we do this one right also, even if that means a delay of a couple months while we go back and do it over again?
I think I saw the hand of Director Sharkey.
Yes. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Just want to mention that most of the hauling is done by our crews. So they pick up the asphalt. So this is not, the salt domes are usually much larger, particular salt brought to the domes in terms of those large trucks. Most of this asphalt is picked up by our crews individually. And we also have another asphalt vendor, which I believe is Plus Jones, and hopefully Tish or Brent can help us on that. Not asphalt, hauling vendor as well.
Hauling contractor, yes.
Hauling contractor, yeah. So those are separate pieces in some ways.
Okay, at this point, are there any additional questions from members of the board? Mr. Comptroller, your floor is yours.
Yeah, this is just right back to Director Sharkey. When you say that most of the hauling is done by your crews, this is, I admit, kind of a subjective question, but is that literally what they do? Or are you pulling crews off of other work to do this when that is needed?
No, there's crews that are doing road work, and to get the asphalt, they go and get the asphalt.
Okay, so they're just going and picking up the asphalt that they're going to use. Okay,
Yeah, and I guess if I can jump in real quick, Director Sharkey, it's my understanding that the work that you're talking about is not factored into this paving material bid at all, but the hauling work that we're talking about is the hauling to get it from the supplier manufacturer to the individual site, be it M. Louise or be it Flanagan. That's the opportunity from a minority women business enterprise perspective on this particular material contract.
But that's primarily done by our in-house crews.
That's still done by your in-house crew. So they purchase it, you pick it up, and then take it to their individual site?
Our individual site.
Oh, okay. So they purchase
our work site.
They purchase it, and it's not stored in one location, say at M. Louise or at Flanagan. It's stored.
Not the hot asphalt. No, the hot asphalt we can't leave hot asphalt. We have to get it hot.
Got you. So you would go to so they had the contract, you would go to the vendor, you would go to that vendor and just get it.
Correct.
All right, so why wouldn't the city just develop, why do we need a middleman for that?
We don't. We sometimes we do, but usually we do it ourselves. Our guys, like guys in yellow trucks.
No. What I'm saying is, why do we need a vendor to procure the hot asphalt? Why doesn't the city just procure the hot asphalt? If we're picking it up, we're delivering it, we're doing the labor, like, why do we need somebody else to purchase it for us to go pick it up from the manufacturer?
These M. Louise and Flanagan are manufacturers of hot asphalt. So they own the plants. They are the owners of the asphalt plants.
Understood.
So they also do, both companies also do work themselves on roads and other places, but they also own asphalt plants.
Understood.
So in this particular contract, they are the supplier of asphalt. So they make the asphalt and we purchase it. Whereas they also both do contracts with the city where they repair roads using the asphalt from their plants.
And that mixture of the aggregate and sealant is what they have to procure in order to make it for the city to then come pick it up and utilize it. Got it.
Well, I think some of the things they buy, but in terms of the actual asphalt, they make it. So they have to buy the whatever oil or whatever, I don't know what goes in there.
Gotcha.
So whatever goes in there, they mix it and give it to us.
Understood. At this point, are there any other additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Seeing none, I'm going to give the protest in M. Louise 1 minute to kind of communicate any final thoughts. And then I'll provide the same opportunity for Flanagan, and then we'll look to try to figure out a way that we can proceed. So, Ms. Louise, if you would like to speak on behalf of M. Louise at this point, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. First of all, I'd like to just continue to clarify that M. Louise did ask on several occasions via email and city buy for the asphalt historical quantity usage. We did not ask for the sealant because Flanagan had already done that and gotten a ridiculous answer, and there was no point to asking it again. Secondly, Mr. Kiola said that M. Louise is providing asphalt right now at an increased cost to the city. I'd like to remind you that because we were able to even compete on this bid, you've already saved 38%, because instead of paying $45 to M. Louise, you would have been paying $65 to Flanagan, which is exactly what you've been paying for the last 10 years or so, $65 to $68 a ton. So there was a $20 savings there. As for the hauling, I'm speaking about MBE opportunities prior to delivery of final product. There are MBE opportunities for the hauling of the aggregates, MBE opportunities for the hauling of the liquid asphalt that is necessary to make the asphalt.
That's what I thought I was trying to say, Ms. Louise, but go ahead.
And there are MBE opportunities for aggregate brokering. So I'm not talking about.
What's that? I'm sorry to cut you off again. What was that last point? The last aggregate? What is that called?
Aggregate brokering. Plenty of MBE aggregate brokers out there that can be included in this. The last point I'd like to make is that by awarding the contract such as is, this contract has been materially changed in its intent, from being an asphalt supply contract vehicle to being a sealant supply vehicle. So the contingent item, which is the sealant, is now 10 times greater in dollar value than all of the asphalt that you actually need. So the state spec is 0.4 gallons per ton. So it's extraordinarily materially changed. You are awarding a sealant contract as is. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you. And Mr. Kiola, are there any parting information that you would like to provide to the board at this time?
I've just texted my client to understand what internal hauling in order to supply the product exists, because I'm not certain on that point. So if you could just give me one moment here.
Well,
I had not understood that there was hauling in order to sell the product.
I thought you communicated earlier that you guys were in the position. I mean, you broached this idea that despite having 0 MBE, WBE goals built into the contract, that you guys historically and on this particular job were expected to use MBE, WBE contractors.
Well, that we do use for the occasional time where the city does ask us to deliver asphalt and doesn't send its own trucks to our plant to purchase. So on occasion where hauling is needed to deliver asphalt, we employ MBEs for that. So that was my point, not that we have internal hauling obligations in order to have someone buy asphalt from our plant.
I think that the point was hauling of the aggregates, the sealants and stuff like that to your plant so you can do the mixture so you can come up with the end product.
Yeah, that wasn't my point. That wasn't my point, President Mosby. Apparently, under this contract, occasionally cold patch is asked to be delivered, and that's what we use MBE contractors for.
All right. Well, we always try to open this up to all parties involved. I think we do a good job of having a very productive professional discourse because this is the city's business. I mean, every single dollar, particularly during times like this, really, really matter. And that's why we have some of these very long-winded discussions on really important items such as this. Again, at this time, I think we've heard from the law department, we've heard from DOT, we've heard from procurement. We've also heard a tremendous amount of information from not only the protester, but also the respondent and ultimate bid awardee. With that, I think the comptroller laid out, 2 potential options. I do find major concerns associated with anything that comes across, and we haven't done all that we can do to ensure that we're looking at it from an MBE, WBE perspective. I think that Ms. Louise brings up some really important and valuable points. Unfortunately, Flanagan is not in the position to kind of talk about those points at this moment, but it is somewhat concerning to me. I think it's also interesting when we look at it from a competitive multi-bid environment where maybe we segregate off certain parts of the city to drive more effectiveness and efficiency, particularly with the work that we're talking about here. And then, I think we all can agree that with the indefinite quantity and the change of kind of the scope of the job from the first bid to the second bid can seem as a little bit problematic and may not be the city's best foot forward as it relates to creating a true best estimate bid process for our vendors. So with that, at this point, Comptroller Henry, I think that you had 2 potential options. Definitely willing to support the option of going back and rebidding this job. But I will defer to you for where you are with next steps.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move that we reject all bids and bid this contract out again.
So a motion's on the floor. Do I hear a second? I will second your motion. So it's been moved and properly second for the idea of items 1 and 2 to go back to bid to kind of address some of the aforementioned items that was brought to us today. All those in favor of the rejection of this bid, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
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 So the nays have it. This your motion fails, Mr. Comptroller. At this point, are there any additional motions to be presented to this board?
I move that we approve the award of the contract to Flanagan on items 1 and 2.
Second.
So this item has been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving this item, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Please allow the record to reflect that this Motion is carried forward with a 3-2 vote. The two nays are Mr. Comptroller and myself, President Nick Mosby. So again, thank you all for a very long winded discussion. I think that a lot of items were able to be addressed. I think that it's a tremendous amount of progress that the city needs to make, and this is what we do on every Wednesday at 9 o'clock. There is one additional item that we have to go back to. I think that we still have Chief Miller on the phone. Chief Miller, are you still available to speak with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so we're going to go back to, for everyone's knowledge, page 40, item number 11, Metropolitan Protective Services Incorporated. This is a $4.5 million increase in extension to a contract number B50004352 to provide armed security services to a number of city agencies and facilities. If this item sounds familiar, again, this is because it's a similar extension for a smaller amount was deferred at a previous meeting of BOE. From all of the communication with the administration, it's my understanding that this item before us today is here because it's an agency critical needs that necessitate this extension while bidders are vetting for a longer term award. This increase is attributable to a large part of the ongoing pandemic crisis. We spoke to Ms. Brown from Bureau of Procurement. I think we left it off to go back to Chief Miller to kind of talk about this item. I think the question was raised from myself that was on the table. The concern is, why are we looking to extend this particular contract that has 0 MBE, WBE goals built into it? Are there other security contracts that have MBE, WBE goals built into them? Why could we use one of them as a vessel for this immediate work?
Yes, good morning, Council President Mosby, Mayor Scott, Comptroller Henry, and members of the board. As it relates to this is the armed security contract, and I believe Metropolitan is the prime. With regard to security firms, we do have quite a few that are in the program. However, this contract is very specific to the need for armed services or armed security guard services, which are those officers who are licensed and have the proper credentials to carry armed weaponry. And so with this contract, I believe the agency is currently at a need to extend it because of the various locations where they've had to supplement additional security guards due to the COVID pandemic. And with regard to our program firms that we have for armed services, we currently only have 2. We initially did a search a while back or just based on a previous inquiry that we were researching, and 3 of the firms have expired their certifications without attempts to renew them, and then the other 2 that are in the program are the only 2 that are armed for those types of services. So if another contract is bid, it could potentially include MBE goals depending on what the specifications are as listed by the agency and the procurement overall.
You're muted, sir.
Thank you. I'm sorry. So if I hear you right, Chief Miller, there are other MBE, WBE opportunities, but maybe they are not currently working at the agencies where this work that we're talking about is needed, that the idea is to extend the current contracts that those agencies have with the existing provider just from an efficiency perspective, while we look at developing a longer term solution that will have MBE, WBE goals factored into them. Is that accurate?
I believe so, but in order to better assess what the need was for the agency, I would probably be best to defer that to DGS because I believe they're the control agency that's facilitating the placement of those security guards or even making the determination of where those members would be placed at city locations.
And Director Chichi, are you prepared to kind of communicate to us, I guess, the need? Of course, anything that is sensitive information from a security perspective, please do not go down that path. But as it relates to just kind of where we are, why we need to extend this and this fashion, if you could kind of talk to that.
Absolutely. Good morning, President Mosby, Mayor Scott, Comptroller Henry, and members of the board. I can absolutely answer those questions, Council President Mosby. So I will steer away from any specifics about where it is that we have deployed members of Metropolitan's armed security guard force, just for reasons of security and confidentiality of the people who are in the facilities where they are deployed. The reason I should also point out that what you have before you on the board is an extension just through June. There is currently underway a solicitation or a request for bids for a new contract. So what you have is just to get us through June. Additionally, the increase that is being requested is to cover expenses that have already been incurred by Metropolitan. So in order to be able to process the change or to pay this vendor off the existing POs, we need to add some funding to those POs in order to cover the expenses already incurred. And so that's just need to clarify that this is not a new contract. This is simply to get us to June so that we can get to a fresh contract. And then at that point, engage, as you said, in conversation with Chief Miller in the EMBU office about the potential for goals. Chief Miller did accurately explain why it is that we cannot, at least even just for this gap period, utilize the other existing security companies that we have on contract, and that is because this one is specific to armed guards, which comes with different requirements for licensing and insurance and anything that comes to do with individuals walking around with a firearm.
So from our current knowledge, there aren't any MBE, WBE vendors that have this armed guard certification.
I'm not aware of that. I mean, yeah, Chief Miller did say that there were two, but we did not look into it for the purposes of this extension through June. That may be considered for the new contract. I can't speak to that. I would defer to Chief Miller. However, the need to have this service be continued through June is for obvious reasons critical. And I also do want to point out that DGS is not the only user of the citywide contract. The health department is also using Metropolitan. DPW also uses them. We just come across as being the heaviest of the users, and that is in recent months. That's primarily because we have taken on the role of procuring these services on behalf of the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services. And so a lot of these COVID expenses that we're referring to are associated with MOHS.
Now, Director Chichi, thank you for that background, and I'm glad you were able to clear up the $4.5 million increase because that's concerning, between now and April to June. But I hear that a large segment of that money, I'm not sure if you have the information to tell us how much, was from previous work that was not paid. When we say it's an extension and it was work that was not paid, is that because additional hours that was never factored on the original contract was needed or additional facilities were needed? In that instance, when does it trigger coming back in front of the board for the extension? I mean, my concern is if we didn't need this additional work between now and June, while we were doing this parallel process of a longer term award, when would the 3 million, 4 million, whatever is kind of baked off of what we've already spent, when does that come back in front of the board for us to kind of understand and know what's going on?
I think I understood your question. I'll try and answer. If I don't answer it exactly as you had posed it, just let me know and I'll answer it a different way. But speaking again only for DGS, I can't attest to what portion of the 4.5 is associated with change orders from other agencies. But of that 4.5 million, approximately 1.85 is what DGS has calculated would be needed for all of our DGS sites and the MOHS sites from January. So work that has been invoices that we are anticipating for work from January through June. So I think to answer your question, if miraculously we no longer needed security coverage at some of those sites from April 14th through June, then that 1.85 that we are anticipating would definitely come down. So what we have in the request is a request for an increase to cover what we anticipate based on current spend, monthly spend, what we believe is going to need to cover us through June. So that only partly answers your question. As far as when we would come back in front of this board, that's a kind of a calculation that we have to make anytime we are requesting a new contract. So based on historical spend, what do we anticipate our needs going to be in the new contract that we are trying to put out on the street? In this case, it is very difficult to anticipate that, and all we can do is base it on our historical expenses for the last year, which have been unanticipated. And so I do not expect that in a year from now we will be back. I mean, God forbid we're not in the midst of another pandemic or some other extenuating circumstances where we have to increase this kind of service unanticipated. But I do not expect that we will be at a point where we are coming before you again with astronomical increases that had not been anticipated. This is a hopefully a one-off event or scenario where we've seen this rapid increase. And then also just to put it on record for, just for all our own sanity as far as the fiscal outlook of the city is concerned, we are strongly pursuing reimbursement requests for these COVID-related expenses. So even though we are here before you asking for this increase of 4.5 million, a significant amount of that should qualify for reimbursement.
Understood. Comptroller Henry, I think I saw your hand raised for a question or comment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And I have a couple questions. The first one, I'm not sure if it's more appropriate for procurement or DGS, because this is technically DGS's contract, but it's unclear to me whether other agencies have to come to DGS before using it or not. Okay, so all right, so I'm getting the head shake, so I'm going to turn back to Keisha and ask, who plays gatekeeper with agencies in determining whether or not they use the city's contract with Metropolitan for armed security versus, I assume we have contracts with unarmed security services as well. So who makes the call of whether an agency hires armed security or unarmed security?
Oh, that's initiated by the agency. So their needs are comes from the agency. But I was nodding my head too when I thought we were going in a direction, and we've had this conversation before, for who's allowed to use a citywide contract.
Oh, no, I get that part. Okay. I learned. Okay. But so what I'm trying to sort of get my arms around is there anybody outside of the agency who gets to step in and say, I see you've requested armed security here. Can you lay out a justification for why you need armed security and not unarmed security? Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm asking that is, it's been a real point of sensitivity for the last several years, how we deal with interactions between the police department and the community, and how members of the police department behave with their weapons. And so I would think that given the clear sensitivity of those matters, it would be nice if there was some type of clear policy determination of these are the types of circumstances when a building or an event or a situation requires armed security versus these are situations where we just need somebody to have eyes and ears and be available to answer questions or urge people away. And that distinction, and the reason I'm making this distinction is when this Metropolitan contract was first awarded in 2016, it was for $150,000. And not having been part of the discussion then, it doesn't strike me as a surprise that somebody from DGS could come before the board and say, we have a very specialized situation where we need some armed security that our existing security contracts can't provide. There aren't any real MBE providers doing this available right now, so we got a waiver for MBE, WBE goals on it. And we just need to do this. But since then, if we grant this, the extension and contract increase that's before us today, this contract is now going to be worth $10,405,000. And that's a really dramatic increase over a comparatively short period of time. And, I would love to see data showing otherwise, but my fear is that once it was available, other agencies jumped on it and said, ooh, I want to use armed security instead of these unarmed security services that we already have available. And that's why it ballooned. And during that entire course, we never stopped to look at either, well, at any point, do we now have MBE providers that could be providing some attainment on this? Because apparently now we do. But we also never stop to look at, do we really need to be using armed security for all of these contracts or all of these individual situations? And so I get the importance of doing this contract increase because we have already incurred debt and we need to pay it. And I'm not going to say that the city shouldn't pay for services rendered. But before that new contract goes out on the street, I think we need a real internal conversation of who needs to be using armed security and who doesn't. And that should be something that has some real written down, structured limitations on it, so that we don't find the use of that next contract unnecessarily ballooning as well. So those are. Well, I guess I'll make that last one a question, which is, we know DGS is using Metropolitan for city buildings and for the MOHS properties, but can we get a percentage breakdown of the total usage of this contract by agency?
Yeah,
okay.
We can provide.
And I don't know if anyone from finance is on the call, but it would also be very helpful if we could get how much of this 4.5 million contract increase do we expect to be reimbursed by CARES Act funds?
Director Raymond is on the call.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you, sir.
Yeah. Good morning, Mr. President.
Good morning.
Mayor Scott, Controller Henry, honorable members of the board. I'm Henry Raymond, Director of Finance. We will be able to provide an estimate of the expected federal reimbursement related to the armed services. We'll provide that.
All right, thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
think that's all of my questions, Mr. President.
Thank you. I see the hand of Director Garbart. The floor is yours, Director.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to note to Comptroller Henry's point, from DPW, we do employ both unarmed and armed security personnel. One of the distinctions, one of the critical distinctions is the security and emergency nature of some of our facilities. So obviously some of our water and wastewater assets are of such a emergency and secure nature that we do need to have armed security present for those. That's how we are looking at distinguishing some of these things when they look to the Homeland Security requirements and Homeland Security critical nature of some of those assets. But that is from DPW's perspective, how we are deploying this versus unarmed security.
So with the remaining information that you would like to receive, Comptroller, and I think it makes total sense. Do you have a recommendation for the board?
Well, I guess we don't really have a whole lot of choice when it comes to this is one of those times where we're largely approving work that's already been done for all intents and purposes. It's mixed in with an extension, but the increase in value is because we've already spent the money and we're expecting to get it back from another source. So while it's not a great precedent, I do recognize the exigencies of the circumstances, and so I would move approval of this contract increase and extension, but I do want to make it clear on the record that I expect that we will have conversations about the new contract before it hits the streets, and we will have a clear policy in place over which agencies are using it when, before we put it out to bid. And with that, I'll make my motion.
So you got to make your motion. You didn't make the motion yet.
I'm sorry. I thought I moved approval of the contract increase.
I'm joking. You ended it with, and then I'll make my motion. So it's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. Before we close out, just want to kind of go back to that contract B5006180. It was ultimately approved, but I think this is a really good use case as it relates to when we talk about lowest bid. We talk about the way that this body has always approved contracts similar to this. I'm not going to continue to beat my drum on it, but very problematic to me, and obviously Comptroller as well. Look forward to continue to work with you, Mr. Comptroller, as well as you, Mr. Mayor, as my partners in progress to create a more robust, more effective, and more forward-thinking systems that we all get on these calls every single week and kind of talk about and try to drive towards. So, I think that there will be a tremendous amount of scrutiny placed on this particular bid, ensuring that it does come in at cost. With that, we'll close out. Are there any additional questions or concerns from the board before we close? Hearing and seeing none, as there's no new business before the board today, we will recess until bid opening at 12 noon. The Board of Estimates will reconvene on April the 21st, 2021 at 9 a.m. Also this evening, the board will host an annual Board of Estimates Taxpayers Night beginning at 6 p.m. I encourage all residents to attend and tune in to share as we share the fiscal priorities of fiscal year 2022 through the preliminary city budget that the administration provided last week. I thank everyone for tuning in. Again, Baltimore, please stay safe. Coronavirus is still real. COVID-19 is ravishing through our city right now. I think we had 162 2% increase month over the past month in infected cases, how it's important to still get vaccinated. And we've seen that significant increase, particularly as it relates to Baltimore City residents. We know that COVID-19 is still here. It's still really important to wash our hands, stay socially distant, wear our mask. We can beat this thing, but it's not going to go away with us becoming normalized and enjoying the great weather that we're about to receive. So please stay vigilant as it relates to doing the things that we know that are effective and work. The city has opened up significant amount as it relates to your ability to go and get vaccinated. Contact my office, contact comptroller's office, contact the mayor's office for any advice or any concerns or any problems. With that said, thank you, Baltimore. We love you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Board of Estimates is now in session for the receiving and opening of bids. As part of the overall effort to limit transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the Board of Estimates is conducting bid openings virtually. Members of the public can call in to listen to bid openings live by calling 443-984-1696 and entering access code 0842939. Board of Estimates meetings are broadcast live on Charm TV, channel 25 on Comcast Cable in Baltimore City. Meetings are also streamed on the internet at https://www.charmtvbaltimore.com/live-stream. The Board of Estimates will continue to conduct bid openings virtually while the state of emergency declared by the Mayor of Baltimore and the Governor of Maryland remains in effect. I have the following addendum to note. Department of General Services, bid number GS18812, Baltimore Convention Center planter waterproofing. This solicitation has been canceled. Thank you.
I move that we note the addendum.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. All right, let's take bids to be received. Number one, DOT contract TR 21001, reconstruction of footways citywide. There should be a bid bond if the bid is over $100,000. All right, so pass that down. First bid is from Santos Construction Company, Incorporated. There is a bid bond, and the bid is in the amount of, that's right. What page do you have?
89.
Oh, that's much better. Thank you. Total bid of $1,219,171. All right. All right. I'm not sure if this is your copy of the bid bond or this copy of the bid bond. It was loose. Okay. All right. So the next bid is from J Villa Construction Incorporated. We have a bid bond. And the bid is in the amount of $1,136,300. Next bid is from E&R Services Incorporated with a bid bond in the amount of $1,116,405. And the final bid for this contract is from Manuel Luis Construction Company Incorporated with a bid bond. All right. In the amount of $1,070,292.45. Yeah.
I move that we refer these to the Department of Transportation for tabulation and report.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have contract DOT TR 21002, reconstruction of footways citywide with a bid bond if the bid is over if the bid is over $100,000. First bid is from Manuel Luis Construction Company.
With a bid bond.
With a bid bond. And the bid is in the amount of $1,072,862.30. The next bid is from ENR Services Incorporated.
With a bid bond.
With a bid bond in the amount of here we go. $1,130,080 and no cents. Next is from J Villa Construction Incorporated with a bid bond. And the bid is in the amount of $1,105,700. And then the last bid is from Santos Construction Company Incorporated with a bid bond. And the bid is in the amount of $1,295,425 and no cents.
Okay. This is the last one.
I move that we refer these to the Department of Transportation for tabulation and report.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Put it on top of this.
Okay. Third contract is DOT TR 21003, reconstruction of footways citywide with a bid bond if the bid is over $100,000. This first bid is from J Villa Construction Incorporated.
With a bid bond.
With a bid bond, and in the amount of
It's page 89 again.
yeah, just trying to get to page 89. There we go. Okay. Total bid amount of $914,000 and no cents.
I'm sorry, I missed that, Mr.
$914,000 and no cents.
No wonder I missed it.
Next, whoops. Next is from Santos Construction Company Incorporated
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond. In the amount of $1,058,925 and no cents.
Yep.
Next bid is from ENR Services Incorporated
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond in the total amount of $965,080 and no cents.
Correct.
And the final bid for this contract is from Manuel Luis Construction Company
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond in the amount of $867,642.30.
I move that we refer these to the Department of Transportation for tabulation and report.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Fourth contract today is also from DOT, TR 21005, reconstruction of alleyways citywide. There would be a bid bond if the bid is over $100,000.
Hold on just a second. Glenn, this cover sheet calls for a proposal for reconstruction of footways citywide, which is what we've been doing. You want me to?
Is it 21005?
21005.
This says alleys.
Yeah, this says alleys.
Yeah.
All right.
Is that what it says on the bid?
Hold on. Yeah, the covers of the books all say alleys, reconstruction of alley citywide.
I've got it, thanks.
Okay. All right, so first bid is from Santos Construction Company Incorporated
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond. The bid is in the amount of $1,313,285 and no cents.
Yep.
Is that the duplicate copy? I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. The second bid is from J Villa Construction Incorporated
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond in the amount of $1,600,700 and no cents.
Yes.
Third bid is from LF Mahoney Incorporated
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond in the amount of, the bid is in the amount of $1,558,500. Okay, the next bid is from ENR Services Incorporated
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond. The bid is in the amount of $1,748,930 and 0 cents.
Yep.
The next bid is from Manuel Luis Construction Company Incorporated
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond. The bid is in the amount of $1,436,800 $892.95.
Yes.
And then the final bid on this contract is from Anchor Construction Corporation
With a bid bond?
with a bid bond. Total bid amount of $2,363,127.50.
Yes.
I move that we refer these to the Department of Transportation for tabulation and report.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, contract number 5, General Services, GS 19810, Lexington Street Garage Repairs, which must be extensive. Okay, all right, first one. It's from Simpson of Maryland? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, Simpson of Maryland.
And they have a bid bond.
They have a bid bond.
Oh,
Where's
it's
the-
on the same lump sum total base.
What page are you on?
The very first one, excuse me.
Oh,
End of alternates, schedule of alternates, unit prices. Bid affidavit. Base bid, 10,000 allowance.
bottom of page 50?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, folks. Simpson of Maryland's bid is $362,000. No cents.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Next bid is from Eastern Waterproofing and Restoration of Virginia LLC.
With a bid bond.
With a bid bond. And they're so I'm sorry. There's a total of base bid plus 10,000 allowance at the bottom of 50, but then there's also add alternate number 1 on page 51 for a schedule of alternates.
I think so long as we read.
Just the base bid?
Yeah.
Okay.
We read the same thing, yeah.
Okay, so for Eastern Waterproofing and Restoration of Virginia LLC, the total of base bid plus $10,000 allowance is $119,450 and no cents. Sorry, $455 and no cents.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Which one is that? Which contract is that? Okay. All right, thank you. All right, the next bid is from Restoration East LLC
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond in the amount of 320, I'm sorry, total of base bid plus $10,000 allowance is $320,481 and no cents.
And those, both of those, Mr. Controller, you're adding the 10,000 in to get
Yes.
to your total?
The next bid is from Concrete Protection and Restoration Incorporated
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond. And the total of base bid plus $10,000 allowance is so,
They put the,
yeah,
they didn't fill it out right.
so there's two sections to this. There's a base bid, which is filled out, and then there is total of base bid plus $10,000 allowance, which is filled out in a mathematically incorrect fashion. Do we make the correction verbally?
I don't think so.
Just read what they had.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
We
I
could
think
refer it to the law department.
Mr. Solicitor,
Yes?
these bid proposals have a line in which they list the base bid, and then a second line that they list the total of the base bid plus $10,000 allowance.
I think you should read the second line.
Okay. The second line is the total of base bid plus $10,000 allowance is $39,500.
39,500.
Yeah.
All right, just out of curiosity, what was the line above it?
That's the issue, sir. The base bid is $219,500 and no cents.
219,000 and what?
$500 and no cents.
Okay, well, we've got both numbers in the record now.
Okay. All right. The next bid is from Manolis Painting Incorporated
With a bid bond.
with a bid bond. And the total of base bid plus $10,000 allowance is $561,791 and no cents.
Yes.
Oh, good grief. All right, and the last, this is the one where the bid book is not filled out.
Law.
Yeah.
Sound like they made a bid.
Well, the duplicate is.
So the duplicate is filled out?
It would appear so.
That's a little law.
It's unclear if it's an original. Well, there is a raised embossing. Should probably go to law department.
Yeah, so, well, that's funny, I can't even, I don't have anything on the bid book that says who it's from, so.
That's why I gave you the envelope. Sorry.
Okay.
This
so-
is Quinn Construction. That is what is listed on the envelope as well as the duplicate.
So the bid from Quinn Construction Incorporated has what appears to be properly filled out duplicate proposals, but has not filled out the bid book. So I would like to entertain a motion that this be referred to the law department.
Well, yeah,
So moved.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Do we save a step if we go ahead and record what the duplicate says as a bid?
You don't have an original bid, I wouldn't.
Well, but
Yeah.
the duplicate has an embossed.
Yeah, let's
Yeah, it could be that it's a harmless error.
just in case,
Just in case.
out of an abundance of caution,
Right.
the total of the base bid plus $10,000 allowance for Quinn Construction's duplicate bid is $114,274.00. And I did
Now,
not,
when that gets sent to the law department, both copies, the so-called original and the so-called duplicate should go.
We're sending everything that we open in envelope.
Yeah,
is going
this
with
entire
Okay,
packet
good.
will go down.
Now, while we're at it, and as long as we're being careful, could you check the very first in the stack from Simpson? And that did not have accompanying with it the $10,000 inclusion, at least as articulated by the controller.
Was it 362?
362.
Yeah, that did include that.
That did include the 10,000?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're comparing apples to
I
apples.
thought I had a sheet that said that there were no bids received for 6. Okay, yes. So the 6th contract on our list for today, procurement B50006140, self-release, vehicle immobilization device and services. No bids were received.
We also need to move the last one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, well, all right. I move that we refer all of the reports other than
Quinn Construction.
Quinn Construction to which department is it?
General Services.
General Services for tabulation and report.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And now item 6.
Refer to law.
Oh, we did that.
Okay.
So do we have to do anything other than say that there were no bids received for?
I
Okay.
don't think, yeah, there's no action that
Okay.
we need to take.
All right.
When we opened it, we discovered that this is technical. So I only just got this message.
So there is no bid.
So the only thing you want is to read
Okay.
So it's not marked on the sheet.
Okay. So the 7th and final contract today from procurement is B50005926, Fire and Police Testing Consultant. This is a technical contract, and so we will not be reading prices, just the names of the bidders. Ugh, and the weight of their bids. Okay. I'm tempted to we just work off the cover? If all we have to do is read would this be, well, I guess to be sure that we're talking about the same, there we go. So the first is Industrial Organizational Solutions Incorporated. Oh. Okay, the second response to solicitation is from Morris and McDaniel Incorporated.
Yes.
And then last, but certainly still weighty, is National Testing Network.
I move that we refer these to the Bureau of Procurement for tabulation and report.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. That is all the business before the board at this time. We will stand in recess until 9 a.m. next Wednesday morning, April 21st, for Board of Estimates. Please keep in mind that later that evening, next Wednesday, the 21st, will be the Board of Estimates Taxpayers Night. We invite you to join us at 6 o'clock for a presentation by the Budget Bureau on the budget itself, and then followed by the 7 o'clock Taxpayers Night, at which Baltimore City taxpayers have the opportunity to share their input on the proposed budget for the FY22 year. Thank you very much. Stay safe.